We're gonna spread happiness. We're gonna spread freedom. Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna lead 'em.
I'm the only major candidate who opposed this war from the beginning. And as president, I will end it.
This is why, as president, I will make the fight against al-Qaeda and the Taliban the top priority that it should be.
Second, I will cut tens of billions of dollars in wasteful spending.
That's why I've proposed an additional $1 billion in non-military assistance each year.
I will cut investments in unproven missile defense systems. I will not weaponize space. I will slow our development of future combat systems.
We need more troops, more helicopters, more satellites, more Predator drones in the Afghan border region.
Now, I had no doubt, and I said at the time, when I opposed the surge, that given how wonderfully our troops perform, if we place 30,000 more troops in there, then we would see an improvement in the security situation and we would see a reduction in the violence. We can send 15,000 more troops, 20,000 more troops, 30,000 more troops. I don't know any expert on the region or any military officer that I've spoken to privately that believes that that is going to make a substantial difference on the situation on the ground.
I've always said that the pace of withdrawal would be dictated by the safety and security of our troops and the need to maintain stability. That assessment has not changed.
Tend to end this war. I have seen no information that contradicts the notion that we can bring our troops out safely at a pace of 1 to 2 brigades per month. And again, that pace translates into having our combat troops out in 16 months.
Those are not statements that I ever heard when I was sitting in the pews at this church. Did I ever hear him make remarks that could be considered controversial while I sat in the church? Yes.
You can walk out of a church. I mean, you can go up to a pastor and say, this is wrong.
And as I said, Anderson, if I had heard any of these statements, I probably would have walked out, and I probably would have told Reverend Wright that they were wrong. But they were not statements that I heard when I was in church.
So no one...
Did I ever hear him make remarks that could be considered controversial while I sat in the church? Yes.
If the government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America, no, no, no. Not God Bless America, God Damn America. That's it.
I don't think that my church is actually particularly controversial.
Will you as president say we are out of NAFTA in 6 months?
I have said that I will renegotiate NAFTA, so obviously you'd have to say to Canada and Mexico that that's exactly what we're going to do.
And I think actually Senator Clinton's answer on this one is right.
But how much of that bluster is real? CTV News has learned that within the last month, a senior member of the Barack Obama campaign telephoned the Canadian ambassador to the United States, Michael Wilson. In that call, the Obama operative warned the ambassador that NAFTA would become part of the debate in the Democratic primaries and that Obama would take some heavy swings at the trade deal, but told the ambassador, don't worry, it's just campaign rhetoric. It's not serious. It goes to the question of truthfulness. In other words, did Barack Obama say one thing privately to a foreign government and then say something entirely different to the voters of Ohio and Texas? And it appears that tonight that's exactly what he did, and that's exactly...
In a TV ad in Pennsylvania on his energy proposals, Barack Obama says, quote, I don't take money from oil companies. The truth is, no candidate takes money from oil companies directly because it's illegal to accept donations from corporations.
A quote today from Senator Barack Obama, which puzzled me. He said that we should have sex education in kindergarten. I'm not kidding you. And I scratch my head as I hear that. Sex education in kindergarten.
I remember him using this in his campaign against me, saying Barack Obama supports teaching sex education to kindergartners. And, which I didn't know what to tell him. But it's the right thing to do. But it's the right thing to do. But it's the right thing to do.
My view on FISA has always been that
this administration acts like violating civil liberties is the way to enhance our security. It is not.
the issue of the phone companies per se.
No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient.
It is a close call for me.
There are no shortcuts to protecting America.
You will not see a dime of increased taxes. Not one dime. Not your payroll tax.
The best idea, I think, is to raise the cap on the payroll tax.
Not your income tax.
Your new tax plan is going to tax me more, isn't it?
Not your capital gains tax.
Why would you want to increase anybody's taxes right now? Why would you want to do that? Anyone in America. When we have such a tough time, when these small business people like Joe the plumber are going to create jobs unless you take that money from him and spread the wealth around.
I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody. I think when you spread the wealth around.
His campaign tried to clean up a sizable Memorial Day gaffe about his family's role in liberating a notorious Nazi concentration camp.
I had a uncle who was one of the, who was part of the first American troops to go into Auschwitz.
Obama's point dealt with the need for more mental health services for today's veterans, but it was built on false history, both about his family and World War II. First, Obama didn't have an uncle who served in the U.S. Army. Second, Russian forces liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland in January of 1945. Obama's dubious claim is inconsistent with world history and demands an explanation, the Republican National Committee said in a statement. Obama's frequent exaggerations and outright distortions raise questions about his judgment and his readiness to lead as Commander-in-Chief.
Christ into my life, I learned that my sins could be redeemed, and that if I placed my trust in Jesus, that he could set me on a path to eternal life. When I submitted myself to his will,
I can't simply point to the teachings of my church or evoke God's will.
It was that newfound faith that fortified my commitment.
Which passages of Scripture should guide our public policy? Should we go with Leviticus, which suggests slavery is okay, and that eating shellfish is an abomination? Or we could go with Deuteronomy, which suggests stoning your child if he strays from the faith, to the Sermon on the Mount, a passage that is so radical that it's doubtful that our own Defense Department would survive its application.
As the world knows, will never start a war.
Leading Democratic presidential candidate Senator Barack Obama issued a warning to Pakistan today, saying
he would be prepared to order military attacks against Al-Qaeda targets inside Pakistan.
President Musharraf will not act. We will.
Pakistan, being a sovereign country, will never allow any other country to send troops to its territory for any purpose.
And President Musharraf will not act. Around election time, candidates, they just can't do enough. They'll promise you anything. They'll give you a long list of proposals. They'll even come around with TV crews in tow and throw back a shot and a beer.
I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war. You can take that to the bank.
There are a number of different things that you could do early pertaining to executive orders. One of them is to shut down Guantanamo Bay. Another is to change interrogation methods that are used by U.S. troops. Are those things that you plan to take early action on?
Yes. But if those same candidates are taking millions of dollars in contributions from the PACs and the lobbyists, ask yourself, who are they going to be toasting once the election's over?
You have the same foreign policy. You want more troops in Afghanistan. You're not talking about only going to war with a declaration. You don't want to deal with the monetary, financial crisis in this country. You want to keep, you know, the system together for the benefit of the banks and the big corporations and the politicians. And what kind of change do you have on social policy? Do you care about sick people using marijuana? I mean, have you come out for that? He doesn't want change. He wants the status quo.
And quite frankly, I am not expecting the troops, regardless of whether Obama wins, that they'll be home in 16 months. And that is just pure political talk.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Today, in his press conference, the president made clear that he believes the law does allow him to make this commitment on his own. Listen to this for a moment, if you would.
I'm not a Supreme Court justice, so I'm not going to put my constitutional law professor hat on here. Do I think that our actions in any way violate the War Powers Resolution? The answer is no. So I don't even have to get to the constitutional question.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So I don't even have to get to the constitutional question.
Simply, sir, what's your reaction?
That's a horrible statement. He should get to the Constitution. He doesn't have to be a constitutional lawyer. You take an oath of office to obey the Constitution. If we don't know what it says, how can we take the oath? The Constitution is very clear. You don't go to war without a declaration.
You sit down with your attorneys and tell you what you have to do, but obviously the President of the United States has to do what's in the best interest of the United States to protect us.
Well, this idea of going and talking to attorneys totally baffles me. Why don't we just open up the Constitution and read it?
And the Constitution is the law of the land, and we don't have to be the constitutional lawyers to understand that. We don't need lawyers to tell us what to do and not to do, because we shouldn't be in office if we don't understand what the Constitution says.
Let me distinguish between professional politicians and the public at large. The public is not paying close attention to the ins and outs of how a Treasury auction goes. They shouldn't.
He calls himself...
I want names, I say.
Change. Barack Obama. Real change. We got the most fiscally irresponsible administration in history.
I will be a candidate for re-election in 2012.
Well, we've been there once. We're not going back.
I am tired.
And I hope you are too.
And a lot of people thinking, I'm not going to take this anymore.
Because we know if we've done this much over the last 2 years, imagine what we can do over the next six
wars. Why isn't this said every night on the news? It's not Iraq and Afghanistan. Our military is performing actions in Pakistan. It's performing actions in Yemen, in the Horn of Africa, in Colombia. We're involved in 6 wars right now. We're a 6-war country.
Rebuilding their country when we should be rebuilding ours.
1, 2, 3, 4. You got 4? 4. 3, okay. All right.
6 wars right now. We're a 6-war country.
All those things are happening because of you.
Want more. They want more and more and more.
Policies that have left our children with a mountain of debt.
I mean, that is absolutely obscene. It's immoral. And that we've allowed it to happen.
I'm looking forward to
And I think I should have the opportunity to respond very briefly, and I'll try to make it as quick as possible.
Very briefly, absolutely.
Number one, understand that when Senator Clinton says a mandate, it's not a mandate on government to provide health insurance. It's a mandate on individuals to purchase it. And Senator Clinton is right. We have to find out what works. Now, Massachusetts has a mandate right now. They have exempted 20% of the uninsured because they've concluded that 20% can't afford it. In some cases, there are people who are paying fines and still can't afford it, so now they're worse off than they were. They don't have health insurance and they're paying a fine. And in order for you to force people to get health insurance, you've got to have a very harsh, stiff penalty. And Senator Clinton has said that we will go after their wages. Now, this is a substantive difference, but understand that both of us seek to get universal health care. I have a substantive difference with Senator Clinton on how to get there.
Randy Barnett, the Carmack Waterhouse Professor of Legal Theory at the highly regarded Georgetown University Law Center, where he teaches constitutional law and contracts. Professor Barnett previously served as prosecutor in Cook County, from Calumet City, and he's been a visiting professor at Northwestern and Harvard Law School. Of particular relevance for today's hearing, Professor Barnett argued the Commerce Clause case, Gonzalez versus Raich, which we've heard referred to several times, before the Supreme Court in 2004. Graduate of Northwestern University and Harvard Law School. Thanks for coming today, and please proceed with your statement.
Thank you, Senator. In 2010, something happened in this country that has never happened before. Congress required that every person enter into a contractual relationship with a private company. Now, it's not as though the federal government never requires you to do anything. You must register for the military and serve if called. You must submit a tax form, fill out a census form, and serve on a jury. But the existence of and nature of these few duties illuminates the truly extraordinary and objectionable nature of the individual insurance mandate. Each of these duties is inherent in being a citizen of the United States. Each is necessary for the operation of the government itself, and each has traditionally been recognized. In the United States, sovereignty rests with the people, with the citizenry. And if Congress can mandate that you do anything that is convenient to its regulation of the national economy, then that relationship is now reversed. Congress would have all the discretionary power of a king, and the American people would be reduced to its subjects. In essence, the mandate's defenders claim that because Congress has the power to draft you into the military, it has the power to make you do anything less than that, including mandating that you send your money to a private company and do business with it for the rest of your life. This simply does not follow. The greater power does not include the lesser. No one claims that the individual mandate is justified by the original meaning of the Commerce Clause or the Necessary and Proper Clause. Instead, the government and those law professors who support the mandate rest their arguments exclusively on Supreme Court decisions. But given that economic mandates have never before been imposed on the American people by Congress, there cannot possibly be any Supreme Court case expressly upholding such a power. In my written testimony in a forthcoming article, I explain why nothing in current Supreme Court doctrine on the tax power, the Commerce Clause, or the Necessary and Proper Clause justifies the individual insurance mandate. To summarize that, rather than impose a tax on the American people, Congress decided instead to invoke its regulatory powers under the Commerce Clause. But because the commerce power has never been construed to include the power to mandate that persons must engage in economic activity in litigation, the government has been forced to rely heavily on the Necessary and Proper Clause. But the individual mandate is neither necessary nor proper. First, it exceeds the limits currently placed on the exercise of the Necessary and Proper Clause provided by the Supreme Court in the Lopez, Morrison, and Raich decisions. Second, the individual mandate is not necessary to, quote, carry into execution, unquote, the regulations being imposed on the insurance companies. Instead, it is being imposed to ameliorate the free rider effects created by the Act itself. Congress cannot bootstrap its powers this way. In my written testimony, I also explain why the individual mandate is improper because it commandeers the people in violation of the 10th Amendment that reserves all powers not delegated to the Congress by the Constitution, quote, to the states respectively or to the people. The 10th Amendment protects popular sovereignty as well as the states. But wholly apart from what the Supreme Court has said about Congress's power, each senator and representative takes his or her own oath to uphold the Constitution, and each must reach his or her own judgment about the scope of congressional powers. After the Supreme Court relied on the Necessary and Proper Clause to uphold the constitutionality of the Second National Bank in McCulloch versus Maryland, a case you're going to hear a lot about today, President Andrew Jackson vetoed the renewal of the bank because he viewed the bank as both unnecessary and improper, and therefore he found it to be unconstitutional. He wrote, quote, if our power over means is so absolute that the Supreme Court will not call in question the constitutionality of an act of Congress, the subject of which, and then he quotes McCulloch, is not prohibited and is really calculated to affect any of the objects entrusted to government, it becomes us to proceed in our legislation with the utmost caution, unquote. Therefore, regardless of how the Supreme Court may eventually rule, each of you must decide for yourself whether the mandate is truly necessary to provide, for example, for the portability of insurance. if one changes jobs or moves to another state. Each of you must decide if commandeering that Americans enter into contractual relations with a private company for the rest of their lives is a proper exercise of the commerce power. If you conclude that the mandate is either unnecessary or improper, then, like President Jackson, you are obligated to conclude that it is unconstitutional and to support its repeal. But even if you do not find that the mandate is unconstitutional, this week's ruling in Florida suggests that there is a good chance that the Supreme Court will. So you might want to consider constitutional alternatives to the individual mandate sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Barnett.